I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we're going to tie two streamers, uh, kind of classic streamers that were basically fashioned after classic wet flies of old. Um, the first one is the Black Ghost. Um, it was originally created by uh, Herbie Welch of Moose Maguntic, Maine. In 1927, it was tied commercially by Carrie Stevens. Herbie was a popular hunting and fishing guide in Maine and was also a taxidermist and artist. His art is still on exhibit in the Smithsonian Institute. White marabou or bucktail can also be used for the wing. This is a feather wing, and that's the way I'll do it tonight. Uh, the contrasting colors and a little bit of flash make for an excellent bait fish imitation. It can be fished for trout in lakes and streams, but it can also be fished in the warm water lakes and rivers for smallmouth, largemouth, crappie, and white bass. So for the materials, um, again, this is tied with bucktail or marabou for a wing. I think I'll use bucktail for the coachman. For the wing, I'm going to use this dry fly, cheap dry fly neck, India neck. Um, for the tail and the beard, I'm going to use saddle hackle. Um, it's probably preferable to use hen hackle uh, because you want it to show up good. You don't want to use real spiky hackle. You want there to be a little bit of web to it. And a lot of your saddle hackle, sometimes you can get some pretty webby stuff in there. So that's what I usually use for that instead of trying to get a whole yellow hen neck. Um, the body of the fly is rayon floss and um, mylar tinsel for the rib. So back to the fly. All right. So for the first fly,
What size hook?
this is a size 6 streamer hook. It's a
3X?
yeah, 3X long. You can go 4X long. Of course, Carrie Stevens like to do 10X or whatever those real big, um, beautiful streamer hooks. But um, I like it in this size for a good minnow imitation. Um,
6 or 8? I'm sorry.
it's a 6. This is a 6.
Okay.
Um, the key with these kinds of streamers, you want to make sure you keep your thread base um, nice and smooth because your body is just going to be sorry about that noise. I've got some wax in there in the end of my bobbin tube from cheap GSP thread where the wax came off. So I'm going to use this saddle hackle, and you can see that's pretty webby down there at the bottom. So I'm going to stand those hackle barbs out 90 degrees from the stem, and then pull the rachis away, and then just gather those. I've got about a half an inch of feather there, and that's going to give me a pretty stout tail. You can tap the if it ends up getting a little bit out of um, if the tips aren't quite aligned, you can tap on the butts there a little bit. I've got some shorter ones. I think those are from. I'm going to go ahead and pull those out. Oh, and then I destroyed it. So let me get another bunch of hackle. Gather it. And then just kind of tap those butt ends to get it to where the tips are even. Now I don't want to cause a lot of bulk here, so I'm going to clip off those curly ends just so they're not in the picture. And then I want to kind of a little more than a hook gap for that tail. I want that to show up, so that's going to be right about where the thread is anyway. Tie that in nice and tight, right back to where the end of the shank is. And now I'm going to take this 4-strand rayon floss. Well, first I'm going to tie in my rib. On this size of a hook, I like to use the smaller mylar tinsel. This is gold and silver. So I'm going to tie this in with the gold side facing me. So then when I turn it around and start to wrap, the silver side will be facing out. I'm going to hold this back out of the way. I clip it here. So I just clipped that in my material clip there. So now with this rayon floss, it's 4 strands, and that's going to be too much for what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to pull it off maybe about 9 or 12 inches. And then you can see there's 4 strands there. I'm going to take 2 of them. I'm going to set the other ones aside. And then I'm going to tie those in. And then using touching turns up the hook shank, I'm going to try to maintain that smooth body. Now this rayon floss and the that small mylar tinsel is pretty insignificant as far as the thickness of it. So even though that's kind of wrapping around the hook shank as I wrap forward, you can't really tell where that's twisting around there at all. So that should be good enough at the head. So now I'm going to take this floss, zoom out a little bit here, and just stroke it to get it nice and flat, and also to sometimes you get some little fibers of the floss that are loose as you make a turn there. So I'm going to come around.
Mike, are you reverse wrapping that?
I am.
Okay.
The reason is then when I wrap my rib forward, I'll do that in the normal direction, and then it's easier to tie that mylar off.
Gotcha.
So that rayon floss gives it a shinier body than what your thread would do. You could, if you don't have the rayon floss, you could make this out of a thicker UTC or Danville's flat wax nylon. Any flat thread that you can make a nice smooth body. So I'm far enough forward to the head here. So I'm going to trap that in. And then get rid of it. Looks like my hook's a little bit loose. There we go. Now, I'll wrap that. Now you see as I turned that corner, the silver side is now facing out. I want to usually try to do about 7 turns. And that's the body and the tail. So now I'm going to come back a little bit here and zoom out a little bit further. On this cape here, I want to ideally select a feather from each side. So I don't want it to be too big of a feather. I want some of these maybe smaller ones, like right about there looks good. So I'll pluck that free, and then I'll come over to the other side where the curve is going to be going in the opposite direction and grab a feather about that same size. So now when I take those 2 feathers and hold them together, I can get it to where they lay against each other. So the concave sides together holds them flat like a knife blade, like that. So I'm going to kind of even those tips up quite a bit. And then come over to my fly. And I want that wing to go just a little bit past the tail. So mark that, and then just strip all of this extra stuff off of there. Maybe even cut the extra stems out of the way so they're not fighting against each other. And then double check to make sure I got my wing right. Could maybe strip off just about 9 or 5 more barbules there. And then I'll lean that a little bit towards me and make just kind of a moderate wrap over that and come about maybe 3 wraps forward. We'll hold that in place and then take a look at it. Right now it's a little bit towards me, but I think when I tighten that down, that looks pretty good. So I'll clip out those hackle tips. Now at this point, I'm not so much concerned about covering up all that white, because I have one more step to do. And that's to make a beard. Now I'm going to get another saddle hackle here because I'm starting to run out and get down to the short stuff. So I just stripped all the fuzzy stuff from the base of this. And now I want, again, about another, maybe a half an inch. Try to even up those tips as best I can. Strip the rachis away and then gather it. And then for the beard, I want it to come back just short of the tip of the point of the hook there. So I'll mark that in my fingers and cut off all that extra. And then I'll come in here, spin my thread so it'll come back towards that material. And then I can tie it down. Did you see how that went? So now you come back to the eye and start filling in that head. Now I don't want my wing, the end of my head here on the top where the wing is a little further back than where that throat is. So I need to make sure I've got those lined up like that. And I've got all the white and yellow covered up. So I will go ahead and whip finish. Then these flies look great with UV resin for a head. I think I put a little bit too much on there. I want to make sure I don't have any in the eye. And I'll go ahead and zap it. And that is one of my favorite flies to tie and fish. I just love the looks of that fly. Any questions on the black ghost? I don't like how the wing turned out on that one, but that's a Royal Coachman streamer. You probably recognize the look of it. Pretty similar in shape and stature and everything. But again, you could use bucktail for a wing. There's one with a sparse bucktail wing. The Royal Coachman was actually it's a takeoff on the Coachman. So the Coachman was a wet fly that was created in the early 1800s by a carriage driver to give to his English lord for fishing. What's that? It had a peacock curl body, white quill wing or gray, and a brown hackle. And then the Royal Coachman was first made in 1878 by John Haley from New York City. A friend asked John to tie some coachman flies for a friend to take up to the North Woods, but he asked him to make them extra strong. So, of course, this isn't exactly how he tied it, but what he did was to reinforce the delicate peacock herl body, he tied them with a red band of silk in the middle to prevent the bodies from coming unwound. In his original pattern, he used barred wood duck flank feathers for the tail, but all the modern versions are all tied with golden pheasant tippets, like this one. So of course, the Royal Coachman streamer then is adapted from that wet fly. So we'll go back to the other camera. For the hackle, I'm going to use a hen cape, and I'll do that throat a little bit different than we did with the Black Ghost. Peacock herl, I'm just using strung. I'll do a bucktail for a wing, and then red floss for the body. So again, same hook, 3X long, size 6. I'm going to start with red thread, and the reason is when floss gets wet, it soaks through the floss, and if you're using a black thread, it'll take that beautiful red color and just make it look nasty. On a lot of fancy wet flies, especially if it's orange or yellow, maybe white floss for a body, most of the time people will use a white thread so it doesn't have a color underneath it. So the tail is going to be golden pheasant tippets. I don't know if you've ever seen a golden pheasant the way it comes. It's actually looks like something a witch doctor would use. It's the actual head of the pheasant with the beak and everything. The crest feathers are these real nice shiny yellow curved feathers come over the top of the bird's head, and then these tippets are like hackles that hang off the back of the head down the neck. I stripped them off of the bird head and sorted them basically. Some of them are shorter and some of them are longer. I just didn't want my granddaughters to be looking around in my tying desk and see a shrunken head and have nightmares from it. But I'm just going to use these tippets right here for the tail. So you can see in the center, it's real like a thick bar on the end of it there. And as it gets out toward the sides, it tapers off to almost nothing. So I usually start off by just stripping off those side ones. And then if I was doing this for a show fly, I might grab just that center section and use that for my tails. But you just want to kind of line up those tips. Actually, there we go. Those are lined up pretty good now. Gather them together. And it usually works out, at least with this size of a tippet feather, where that dark kind of blends into the peacock curl at the end there. That ends up being just about the right length of a tail anyway. So I'm gonna, in the interest of trying not to get too much of a bump, I'm gonna flatten out my thread a little bit, make sure my tail looks good. Come back and flatten it out some more. And I think I'm just gonna leave this for later as I come back up the hook shank. I'm gonna leave those butts. I'm not gonna wrap them down yet. So for the tag, I want peacock curl. I'm going to take two hurls and just break off this inch at the end. That's usually pretty brittle. And I'm just going to tie those in just by the tips, right there at the end of the shank. And then I'm going to come forward. Then I'm going to take these hurls and hopefully they'll behave. Take some nice tight wraps and then holding my thread real tight, I'll just snip those back like that. Now, same thing with the rayon floss. This is in red. I will take that loose from the spool. And then I'll pull out about 8 or 11 inches. Cut that free, and then I'll just, I'll do this a different way. Separate my two strands of floss. Set those down. I'm just gonna go ahead, nice touching turns, flatten out my thread some. Up to about here. Then I'm going to grab that floss, even up the ends here. Tie that in, and then again, I'm going to as I stroke it, I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, there were some that were loose right there. Got those all pretty much in alignment. There's some a little bit loose there. All right, now I'm going to take this back. This is going to give me a little bit fuller of a body. Go right to that peacock curl and then come back. Hopefully I have enough. I think I do. Could be a Christmas fly. Colors. I've gone a little bit past where my peacock curl is going to be in the front. Clip that out of the way. Grab another section of, actually I have enough left from that last feather. And then I'll tie this down. I want to have that same length of peacock curl underneath the wing. So I'm going to come back like this, and against the tying thread, I'm going to move it forward. And then tie that off. You notice I broke those one at a time on that one because I was getting down toward the base of that peacock curl, and the stem was getting kind of thick. So just to make sure I didn't cause a problem, I just did them one at a time. I'm going to separate some bucktail here. And a little bit more than what I think I'm going to need for that wing. And then I'll just kind of hand stack it the first time so first thing I can do here is I know I'm not going to need any of this real short stuff. So I can just take all that out. Take out the real short stuff. So now I'm left with some pretty even butts there. But I'll take these tips, the longest tips, pull those out, and bring them back and just kind of hand stack a little bit to get it more close. And kind of do this between the camera and so you can see it. I'm starting to lose a little control here. So basically I tried to take the longest tips and move them back. Here's a broken one. Pull that out. So that's got them a little more under control, so I should be able to get them in my hair stacker. You can see I've got a lot of real long tips hanging out of the stacker. So just to kind of make it work a little better, I can grab all those tips like that and cut them off. Give it another stack. And then I've got the tips pretty much aligned there. So I want my wing again to be a little bit longer than the tail, right about there. So I'm going to mark that with my other fingers, cut it off. And then spin my thread so it reaches back, and that should let me, oh, it's too far. What I want to do is try to get around that bunch and then set it down on top. So hopefully that allowed me to get that right on top and not roll up. See, it just rolled over there though. see how that did. That worked out pretty good. Now I pulled that pretty tight and flared it some. I should have enough room. Come back over it with just some moderate wraps and just gather that a little bit. There we go. And then come back forward. All right. So I have a pretty smooth ramp there. I'm going to take I already selected one of those hen hackles. I'm going to take this tip and isolate that. And then with the shiny side facing me, actually, let me go back. Go back toward the back of that wing. Nice and tight. Oh, I pulled it out. That's the danger of it's faster to break your materials away, but that's the danger is sometimes you pull it out if you're not paying attention. So what I did was just clip some of those barbs so I have a place to tie it in. And that should be enough stem, nice and tight, to hold that in place. Now I'll just try to fold those barbs back a little bit, just get them leaning back in that direction. Light over here. Okay, that's about 4 turns. And I'll come back over that with a couple wraps. Come in. Whoops. Now I'm going to hold my wing out of the way, isolate that wing. I'm going to take all that hackle should have done this before I put the wing in. Fold it down and then come over it like that. And that trains that beard to be down. Then I'll blacken my thread. You want to make sure you let that dry real good before you put head cement on it, because it'll bleed into your white wing if you're not careful. A little bit more black. Then I will whip finish. Looks better on this side. So if I had this to do over again, I would have done that beard first, get that looking how I wanted to, and then put the wing on. Because in the process of trying to wrap that down, I ended up rolling my wing, even though I wrapped underneath it. There's a bucktail version. And again, you could do the same with marabou, just use white marabou for the wing. So that's the Royal Coachman. Now, Paul had a problem with poly yarn where he looped poly yarn for a post, and it was kind of splaying out and hard to control. So I don't know if this was his problem or not, but I'll just show you a tip that I saw. So let's say half of this is where I want to have my post, right there. So I'll take my poly yarn and actually that's quite a bit. Let me try to split that. I don't have a smaller poly yarn. This would be a good example because it's kind of a little bit raggedy looking there. All right. I'm going to take this first and I'll leave about an inch back there hanging over where the body would be. And I'm going to tie this in back in that direction. Some nice tight wraps, and then cut it at an angle. So then I can blend that down into the shape of the body. So now I want to make a loop to make my parachute post. So you had it like that. So here's what you can do. You can take it and twist it. And then when you let go of it, it furls like that. Okay. Then you can wrap toward the front a little bit. And that does a couple of things. You've got one side of the poly yarn going toward the back, and it's tapered back that way. In the front, you've got the other leg of it. And so you don't end up with a big glob there where you tied off that poly yarn. Now, as you're tying your fly, that poly yarn is all kept in that twisted, furled thing like that. So then, you know, if you want to like post it up, that actually gives you enough bulk to where you can actually post it without, you know, too much trouble. Because it's twisted, that makes it more sturdy.
I really like that.
Do a rebar.
How tight is your line? Is your line relatively, you know, for your fly tying thread, is it relatively loose as you wrap around the post? Because I keep trying to draw mine over.
So that's kind of what I was trying to show you with that is if you're just using poly yarn and you try to do this, it's going to fold right over. But since
Yeah,
it's
it does.
twisted, it makes it more rigid. And so you can take those wraps to post it a little easier. See, it's trying to lean over if I go too high up, but just kind of medium tightness. But now that I have some wraps around there, I can go pretty tight.